Welcome back to This Day Live, the Sunday talk show here on the Arise News channel. Still with me in the studio, I have Professor Bola Akintenuwa, Director General, Bolitag Center for International Diplomacy and Strategic Studies, and former Director General of the Nigerian Institute of International Affairs. Yemi Adamolekun, Executive Director, Enough is Enough, Arise News Analyst Modele Sharafa Yusuf, and Professor Victor Ariole, Professor of French and Francophone Studies at the University of Lagos. Well, Modele, let me start with you. You listened to that conversation with the PAMSEC of the Federal Ministry of Education. What's your own take? Is it a wise idea that schools will now reopen with effect from tomorrow?
Personally, no. I don't think it's a wise idea that schools are reopening so quickly and with such little preparations put in place. Two things struck me from what the permanent secretary said. One is that those who are ready should now reopen. It suggests to me that they're just throwing this open for anybody. I mean, how do you determine readiness? How do you confirm readiness? How do you monitor when there isn't a strict protocol? Maybe there is and we're not being told. It's just so arbitrary to say when you're ready, you start. That's one. Another thing is, well, like he said, when we observe all of the non-pharmaceutical protocols, then it makes it easier. People should wear their masks, they should wash their hands, they should maintain social distancing. Well, but that's on paper from what we see. People are still not taking those precautions. People, you might say, for example, before you enter the supermarket, wear your mask. And as soon as patrons enter the supermarket, they drag down their mask and put it on their chin and they're going around. And even the people who are working in there are not wearing their masks. So this is what is happening, which makes me to wonder what the National Orientation Agency is doing. Why are they not talking about this more forcefully? Why are they not enjoining people to do what is right? The voices are too muted. The effort seems too limited, and that worries me a great deal. Another thing, the permanent secretary asked a question. What is the guarantee that the numbers will go down? They're asking students to go back to school because we don't know what's going to happen 2 months down the line. We don't know what's going to happen 3 months down the line if we keep the students at home. What is the guarantee, he says, that the numbers will go down? There is no guarantee that the numbers will go down, but there is almost a guarantee that the numbers will go up when these students are thrown into schools without water to wash their hands. We saw the report by the Arise News correspondent there, where there is a school that is due to open tomorrow and the taps are not running. So the likelihood that the numbers will go up is there. He also talked about the demographics. Well, it is true that young people are not so badly affected by this virus. That's what we're told. But we are also told that they spread the virus. They are bigger. They tend to spread the virus more than other demographics. They may be asymptomatic and they're touching things all over the place. They go back home and spread it to their parents or to their grandparents. We're a country where people live, there's intergenerational communal living. The parents, the child is there, the parent is there, the grandparents are also living there. So how do we stop these children from spreading these viruses to the people who are more vulnerable? Another thing he said that struck me is that are the kids going to be prioritized for vaccination? We should be asking him. The Federal Minister of Education is, as he said, a member of the Presidential Task Force on COVID-19. They should be telling us whether these kids will be prioritized. I know that generally, almost all over the world, the tendency is to vaccinate the people, the very old people first, and then the people who are frontline workers, the nurses, the doctors, the supermarket workers. But I think we should, as a country, look at the Indonesian option. Indonesia, for example, have chosen to vaccinate people in the age bracket of 18 to 59 first. They said only people, apart from frontline workers, of course, people in the age bracket of 18 to 59 will be vaccinated first. The reason is that they are the more socially active, they're the more economically active, they're the ones who are more mobile physically. So their thinking is that if they're able to vaccinate these people first, then they might be able to achieve herd immunity very quickly. So that's something that we can also look at. Take vaccination to the universities, for example, so that these young people who tend to be fatalistic, who tend to not obey rules, who tend to take things for granted, can be quickly vaccinated, and we can hopefully achieve herd immunity.
At this point, let me bring in Professor Ariole. Professor Ariole, if you may also address some of those issues and also the tertiary education angle to it.
Well, so I commend seriously the architect, the permanent secretary, and he's passionate about opening schools, which is what he supposed to do and what everybody in the school system supposed to be worried about. Schools must be opened. And opening school means that, you see, we have to evaluate the risk of not opening the schools and the risk of opening the schools. In whichever way, you will see that the risk of not opening the schools, you know, is greater than the risk of closing the schools. With parents at home, with the children, and the children not knowing what to do, and depression and everything setting in the house, in the household, people ought to know that opening the school is worthwhile. And this also calls for evaluating the capacity of school management. People who are in charge of managing the schools and who are in charge of getting these schools going, how capable are they? What are the tasking capacity of their intellect or neuronal processes so as to get the system going? We can't close down because in Britain, they never closed down the schools. They allowed the children to go to school. And they know what it means, giving a gap of 1 year or 2 years or even 1 month of not allowing educational process to go on. I agree that ASU that belong where I belong feel that it's not very comfortable to open the schools now. They are claiming that the government has not made things available for the schools to really be very, very safe in opening. But that's what they would have done for long by not going to strike up to 9 months and allow government to show preparedness of really opening the schools. As I'm talking to you, we, within our own set, have accepted to open the schools as from 18 and have an online teaching as from 25th of January. That, again, I'm a bit worried about it because online teaching is not what the conventional universities are meant to do. But if that's the only way, the option we have to go to get teaching going on, there is no problem. But I expect a situation where the university as a community should really do something to prove whether it's the management or the alumni or partners, whoever, that could be made to come in, like the architect was saying, adopting schools. Whoever could be made to come in should come in and prove that the university as a community could even decide to lock itself down by having its community right inside there, not going out or going in, and see what they would do within the 10 or 12 or 15 weeks that a school is supposed to run, and run what is supposed to be, and, you know, administer lectures and exams and close it and get result out of it. I know as we are talking now, at the time the schools closed, we just had about 3 weeks in our own case to round up everything about first semester in UNILAG. And I expect as of today that 10 to 20 hours each students have. Well, no, 16 to 20 hours, which is what is expected of every student in a week to have, well, maybe from 8 to 10 courses he will be doing within a week. That within that 10 to 20 hours, the lecturers or the school system supposed to really forget research and community service component of the university system and maybe concentrate basically on the teaching aspect and the learning aspect. And either do some, what we call fire brigade approach towards that and end it up and allow research and community service to linger a bit or be skipped a bit for now, which could go on after. So these are issues that they have to take into consideration and allow the community, a university community, to be in place and task their ability and their senses and their intelligence and their survival instinct in maintaining the university community system. Well, and every university management should be tested now on this particular issue.
Well, Professor Akintenewa, let me come to you. What are the big issues for you with regard to the plan to reopen schools beginning from tomorrow?
I think architect Sonny Ishono made a bright submission, but the submission is most unfortunate. I belong to the school of thought of Modele Sharafa, who actually drew attention to some of the basic issues. Good and bright submission, only to the extent that we are being told what the government, the federal government, has been doing. But the question to ask, and this is why Modele is quite right in her submission, is it now that we are being told that government has been doing X, Y, Z? From the time of the first wave, we've been told about the need to respect the protocols, and we've been doing just that. The question to ask is this. On the one hand, we do have all these governmental efforts. They are doing this in the morning, in the afternoon, in the evening. They have taken all the precautionary measures. Yet, the number of infections is on the increase. How do you explain that? If the efforts you have been making before now and until now have been good enough, then why is it that you are unable to address the spike? So I now ask myself, when the architect is educating us on this, so all these beautiful rhetorical analysis are there for public consumption. They do not address the critical issue of safety. Now let's take the issue of the children, for instance. Should they be given priority? I do not share the viewpoint of the Indonesian submission by Modele, according to which you should give try the vaccines on people from the age of 18 to 59. Why? The latest report as of yesterday in Norway, those people who are tested on Pfizer vaccine, 23 people died. It's on record. So why do you want to try vaccines on the younger people? Why should our younger people die? We older people should die first to allow the children to grow and learn from our own mistakes.
Actually, nobody should die.
No.
On account of taking a vaccine.
I agree with you. I am even saying that, first of all, leadership by example. You don't put the children in front. I would prefer to die before my children will die. So, I am trying to say that, according to the architect, I agree with him with the explanation he gave that resumption is not on January 18, but from January 18. and that schools are free. All right? Schools are free to resume when they are able. But Mondeley rightly asked, how do you determine readiness? How do you determine that? Is it because you have provided sanitizers? Is it because you have put on your face mask? No. You see, the submission of the architect, if I say it's most unfortunate, is simply because it shows the whole world the weaknesses, the remissness of governmental approaches to all that. The government is not ready for anything. And that's why you are not saying, okay, if you are ready, please, you can resume.
Well, let's see whether Yemi Adamolekun has now joined us. Yemi, are you with us at this moment?
Yes, I am. Good afternoon.
Yes. Well, I mean, you've been following the conversation. Schools are to reopen with effect from tomorrow. And you must have listened to the PAMSEC Ministry of Education. What's your take?
Well, I have to agree with Prof to a large extent that the feedback sounds good. You sort of get the idea that they're working, but it's just, as I said, it's good for public consumption. The issue at hand is if you say, for example, schools should reopen when they are ready, what's the metrics for that? He was very clear to say that the federal government doesn't own any primary schools. They own maybe 100 plus secondary schools and then the universities. So let's take the universities, for example. He said, yes, that they're on the platform and that they have the capacity, but all they're asking for is support. And I find that very disturbing because I think it was also Modele who said last week, for example, reminded us of what our lecture halls in universities look like. So when he says they have the capacity, what does that mean in real terms? So halls that have students packed, leaning out of windows, standing, sitting on the floor, what does that translate to? If they were given money, what does that mean? Do they suddenly build new lecture halls? So I think for me, that if I use that as an example, just shows the fact that, again, as we've said several times on this platform, that as a country, we don't prioritize education, not in terms of development, not in terms of what it means to us as a people. We're talking about Nigeria beyond oil, this, that, and the other. As he himself said, it's the education system that produces our doctors, produces our engineers. So if we're not prioritizing it or thinking critically through what that means, ASU has been on strike for 9 months. At the whole time where they were on strike, was anybody thinking about how, when they do stop their strike and students go back, what that looks like for students? What do we need to do at the university levels? Professor Riole is there and he was talking about maybe put research aside and community service and focus on lecturing, crash course. What does that look like? So I think for me, those are the conversations we're not having. And again, as I've said several times, this is a great opportunity for the federal government to let go of universities and let them be fully independent, source their funding, give grants for students so they can apply to school, so we can actually have universities that can serve a purpose. State governments now need to be on sort of greater spotlight because primary schools are their domain, a lot of secondary schools are their domain. So what are they saying? We've had the PAMSEC at the federal level, but really this conversation needs to be happening at every state level, understanding what plans do they have for students coming back. And I also agree with Prof. If there's anybody to experiment vaccines on, it's definitely not children. It should be on adults. And we should factor that into the phase, how we phase back. I mean, I think schools should be open. I think that should be, we want schools to be open. We want students to be educated because they've already lost an academic year. We need to curtail that as much as we can. But then there needs to be a well thought out plan to ensure that happens, not just on a wing and a prayer.
Well, thank you very much, Yemi. Let's move on to the next topic, which is about the Armed Forces Remembrance Day. The Nigerian Civil War was fought between 1967 and 1970 over the declaration of the state of Biafra, made up of states in the eastern region, which declared their independence in May 1967. When the conflict ended on January the 15th, 1970, as many as 1 million people had died of starvation, disease, and injury. Now, half a century on, President Buhari on Friday led top government officials and service chiefs to honor the nation's fallen and living heroes on a day now called the Armed Forces Remembrance Day. At the commemoration, the president urged Nigerians to desist from actions and comments that could jeopardize the unity and progress of the nation, reminding Nigerians of the sacrifices that were made and how soldiers gave their lives so willingly at a great cost for the country's unity. At a later event, the vice president also spoke on the need for Nigerians to show more commitment to the unity of the nation and the task of building a better country. 51 years later, however, the question remains: what truly is the legacy of the war? Bringing the country together or pushing it further apart? Arise correspondent Ferdinand Duroha reports.
Who died in the line of duty. These include those who fought in the First and Second World Wars, peacekeeping missions, and in various theater operations. It also celebrates those on the front line. Celebrated at the National Arcade, the event, which was presided over by the special guest of honor, Commander-in-Chief of the Nigerian Armed Forces, President Muhammadu Buhari, had dignitaries in attendance, including leadership of the National Assembly, service chiefs, and members of the diplomatic community. Some of the activities to commemorate the day include a solemn parade in honor of the fallen heroes, interfaith prayers, firing of volleys, laying of wreaths, signing of the Armed Forces Remembrance Day Register, and releasing of pigeons. For an annual event with plenty of color and rituals, there is a tendency for the essence to be lost. Some of the dignitaries speak on how best to honor these fallen heroes.
For how far we have come now, we'll say yes. At least some of the widows are relieved. But we will still ask for more help, mostly on accommodation and job opportunity for our children and the young widows. Those at the age of 25 to 35. Like I keep on saying, we'll come knocking our doors for employment. They should please keep their doors open for us.
Even though the armed forces have been there for us, trying to call up on us once in a while, I think they can't do it all. So we'll have opened up to the government, to the nation at large, to see to our aids. Because when the breadwinners go, what are we left for? We are left for, on our own to try to fend for our families and children and like that.
NAPA's Empowerment Development Fund, we feel it's a public-private fund whereby each and every Nigerian should donate to that kind of a fund, which will augment the suffering of these ex-servicemen, widows, and children of the fallen heroes.
What we've done is to ensure that even if you are gone, we honor your memory. Like I said, we ensure that your family is taken care of. And for those who are serving, we encourage them.
With Nigeria still battling insurgency and soldiers actively participating in theater operations across the country, much more is needed to boost the morale of servicemen aside yearly rituals. Ferdinand Duroha, Arise News.
Well, Armed Forces Remembrance Day this year on January 15. The Nigerian Legion was part of that ceremony across the country. There were similar ceremonies in all the states of the Federation. And of course, a day specially dedicated to remembering those who paid the supreme sacrifice so that Nigeria can remain one. Let me start with you, Yemi. The Defense Minister was saying that Nigerians should learn to speak well of the military so that they can be encouraged to do a lot more to protect the territorial integrity and the sovereignty of Nigeria. What's the symbolism of the Armed Forces Remembrance Day for you?
I mean, it's important. It's extremely important to honor those who have paid the ultimate sacrifice to protect Nigeria's territorial borders and Nigerians by default. And I think for the most part, I think Nigerians do speak very well of our military and to the degree of the work that they do and their service to the country. social media platforms are quite quick to honor gallant soldiers or brave soldiers when reports come out of the work that they do, or when, I mean, there have been fundraising efforts, for example, for some soldiers online, and people have been willing to give as well. The widows, as we saw in the report, are constant sort of issues around their benefits not being paid of their husbands, and they then being in a very difficult position. But again, due to the culture of the military and the police, by extension, they struggle to come forward and put a face to the work, or to sort of their demands, so to speak. So their presidents of their associations tend to speak forward. So I think it's quite unfair to say that Nigerians don't speak well of the military when it comes in the context of their service. But they do speak very negatively in terms of the military leadership and institution. Because ultimately, if people within the military establishment are complaining that they're not getting their benefits, that they're not being given the right equipment to do the work that they need to do, that they're in a sense being sent on a suicide mission because you're sending me to fight Boko Haram and not equipping me accordingly, that's a problem. And so Nigerians would always rise up and speak negatively in that regard about the response, so to speak, to issues that affect integrity and the country, if you take Boko Haram. But on the most part, I think Nigerians are quite mindful of the sacrifices that our men in uniform do make.
Well, Modele, let me come to you. What's your view of this annual celebration of our fallen heroes and commemoration of the day, January 15th?
Is what happens all over the world. If you recall, the Armed Forces Remembrance Day used to fall on November 11, when all Commonwealth countries celebrate what we call the Poppy Day, to remember fallen heroes, those who died in the First and Second World Wars. But Nigeria changed the Armed Forces Remembrance Day to January 15 after the end of the Civil War. As you know, the Civil War ended on January 15, 1970. But you know, one of the things that we need to remember is that January 15 is actually a very significant day in the life of Nigeria as a country, because the events that led to the Civil War itself began on January 15, 4 years previously, January 15, 1966, when the first coup happened, and it was deemed a coup by soldiers of the Eastern extraction against the leadership of the Nigerian military. Everything went downhill from January 15, 1966, and culminated in the Civil War, which started in 1967 and ended on January 15 again in 1970. The lessons from the Civil War, have we learned it though? I don't know if now is the time to talk about that, or you want us to talk about that later, Ruben, since you're leading this conversation. But should we be celebrating our fallen heroes on this day? Yes. Is government doing enough in this area? Well, the fact that they're doing it annually and there's so much pomp and pageantry around it speaks to that fact. Are Nigerians themselves remembering the sacrifice of our falling of soldiers? Yes, but are they doing enough to support those who are alive and the dependents of those who have died? No, I don't think so.
Well, Professor Akintenewa, let me come to you. Modele has raised two key issues about the symbolism of January 15 in Nigerian history. January 15, 1966, the day that Nigeria had its very first coup, led by Kaduna Chukwumanzogu, Emmanuel Ifiajuna, Don Anuforo, Timu Wotagu, Don Okafo, Adewale Ademoyega, and Chukwuka, Humphrey Chukwuka, the majors, as it were. And some people argued that that was the day Nigeria died because 22 persons were killed in the course of that coup. And then there was a counter coup of July 1966, and then the Civil War followed. And 51 years later, down the line, many Nigerians are saying Nigeria has not recovered from the Civil War that followed. What are your thoughts?
For purposes of research records and for reasons of psychology of human differences, this time I do not share the view of Mandela that January 15 is a good date to remember our fallen heroes. You have just given the narratives. You know, November 11 is generally referred to as Armistice Day. And armistice, for me, may not be synonymous with remembrance. Okay. Now, in the context of Nigeria, Armistice Day, the end of the war itself, was January 12, 1970. Now, January 15, as you have rightly told us, was actually the day we had the first coup d'etat. And then you also told us rightly that many people considered that day as the day of destruction of a new Nigeria in the making. So if you want to remember fallen heroes, and January 15 is not known on record to be a good day, are you now saying that fallen heroes are bad people? It's a question of logic. So in this case, January 15 is never a good date in the political history of Nigeria. It's not good. And because it was not good, that was what prompted a counter coup in July 1966. And in an attempt to deal with the counter coup, and because Odumegwu Ojukwu said it is not known in military history where a junior officer will court-martial his senior, because he was arguing by that time that he was, militarily speaking, senior to Yakubu Gowon. That Yakubu Gowon was only senior politically. Being the head of state was politically. Well, so in this case, the issue was that Gowon was now compelled to quickly decide to reorganize the country from 3-region system to a 12-state situation.
Prof, is it possible to separate the date from the essence, the symbolism, the message that government tries to put across when it says on every January 15, we'll remember our fallen heroes? Aren't they two different issues?
Yeah, but when you are talking about symbolism, there's no way you can differentiate between the day for instance, somebody comes in to kill the wife of an individual, and you are now saying you want to be celebrating the day of killing. How symbolic will that one be? We are doing many things wrongly in this country. You see, the issue of remembrance, first of all, what are we really remembering?
Heroism.
Well, I'm coming.
Valor.
No.
Sacrifice.
See, I understand that. You see, we are not very explicit in whatever we are doing. The way we can actually remember and celebrate fallen heroes should not just be by following this Europeanized style of putting writ and say, making speeches, signing register. There are better ways of remembering them. One, for instance, if you set aside January 15, for instance, you can institutionalize a national conference on which day you will be discussing the challenges of the previous year, learning lessons, and then using the lessons to inform policy making. That is one method. A second method, for instance, look at the widows, the families. They are neither catered to nor catered for. They are complaining. And then on that day, you see officers, big officers, coming with a coterie of entourage. No. All these remembrance days are unnecessarily too ceremonial.
Well, quickly, let me bring in Professor Ariole. Professor Ariole,
no, seriously
before
speaking,
we take the next topic.
On a lighter mood, I don't really support Sharafa's position of seeing it as Eastern extraction coup. Because Nzogu comes from Midwest. It's not from East. And Ademolega is from West. It's just that majority maybe of those who carried the coup came from. And in effect, if you really want to celebrate someone, both 15, the day the coup was carried out, and 15, when Biafra surrendered, the two people who come in as heroes still remain heroes to Nigerians. Nzogu was buried as a hero, a Nigerian hero, whether we like it or not. Major Nzogu was buried as a Nigerian hero, and his friend, General Obasanjo, who got Biafrans to surrender, is still alive and is still seen as a hero. So January 15, certainly, they must have really planned it to prove that the basic fallen heroes are basically President Nzogu and General Obasanjo. That's my own perception of fallen heroes, and they could be...
Prof, a caveat here. A caveat here is that January 15, Armed Forces Remembrance Day, is not limited to the Civil War. It covers Nigerian soldiers who fought in the First World War, the Second World War, Nigerian soldiers who went on international assignments and who fell, and it includes all the soldiers who at one point or the other have had to pay the supreme sacrifice to defend Nigeria. Let's move on to the next topic.
And even those living.
Ruben,
we need to move on.
Okay, we can move on, but you see, for records purposes, nobody is saying that it does not include First World War, Second World War. The choice of January 15 is what we are now talking about. January 15, Uzegu didn't die on January 15.
No, he carried the coup.
Precisely.
But he died. When he died, he was celebrated by Nigeria.
The fallen heroes on January 15, they are the politicians.
Okay,
fine.
They're
not the military.
I agree with you.
I'm sure that there are many Nigerians. There are many Nigerians
the soldiers
who
that
will not
died
include the coup makers of January 15, 1966 among the fallen heroes. Emmanuel Ifeajuna won the first Commonwealth medal for Nigeria. Till tomorrow, Nigeria has refused to give him due recognition. But don't let's open a can of worms on this occasion. President Muhammadu Buhari pleads with critics of his government, particularly the nation's elites, to be fair in their criticism. The president wants them to first consider the state of the country he inherited in May 2015, as well as the resources available to the federal government under his watch. According to a statement by his special advisor on media and publicity, Femi Adesina, the president made the call while receiving the executive secretary of the Nigerian Christian Pilgrims Commission. The president went on to give his government a pass mark on the security situation in the Northeast, while admitting that there is still what he calls occasional Boko Haram problems. He says there is a lot of improvement when compared to the past experiences of the residents of the affected states. Well, Professor Ariole, let me start with you here. President Buhari says, well, what he has done may not be satisfactory enough for some Nigerians, but he's asking for understanding, considering where we were and where we are today, and resources available, and what his government has been able to do with the resources available.
Well, it's normal. He's the president and he is the person in charge. As of today, he can't give himself a fail mark. So he must see how best to position it so that Nigerians will be fair to him. But I expect really a serious scorecard. Scorecard in the sense that he would have said, yes, this is precisely where we saw Boko Haram or Northeast issues or problem of Nigeria before we come in. And this is where we are today. And possibly these are the differences that we must really breach to prove that we have done better. But that's always not there. Because I just don't feel comfortable referring to past government. Because government is a continuous assignment. Soldier come, soldier go, barracks remain. Which means somebody who comes in must find a way to better the situation. And I expect him to tell Nigerians, like they used to say about Northeast, that when they came in, the local governments in Northeast, most of them were occupied by Boko Haram. But as of today, they have liberated them. Agree. But where I get worried about the people in the IDP camps and those Nigerians who are refugees in Chad, Niger, and Cameroon, just like Professor Zulum went there to visit them. Is it not so disturbing that you have a nation that is not at war with other countries and its citizens are there as refugees in the bordering countries? And I expect Nigeria to be worried about that. You know, I expect Nigeria to be worried about that. Well, very decisive.
On that note, Professor Ariole will take another quick commercial break. When we return, the Sunday Talk Show will continue. Welcome back to This Day Live, the Sunday Talk Show here on the Arise News Channel. I still have with me in the studio Professor Bola Akinterewa, Director General, Bolitak Center for International Diplomacy and Strategic Studies. Yemi Adamolekun, Executive Director, Enough is Enough. Arise News Analyst Modele Sharafa Yusuf, and Professor Victor Ariole of the Department of Francophone Studies at the University of Lagos. Well, before we went on break, Professor Ariole, we were talking about President Buhari's scorecard. Let me take Professor Akinterewa quickly.
I asked myself, when does criticism, when is it considered fair and unfair? The president says elite should be fair. I think it is the appeal of Mr. President to the elite that is not fair. The criticisms of the elite about and against policies of government cannot really be described as unfair. We can give many examples. First of all, criticism can be considered as an art or as an act. As an act, we have a situation of a rivalry, competing arguments, a set of superior arguments versus weak arguments, depending on who is kickstarting it. When, for instance, government comes up with a policy statement, and an observer now comes out to criticize it, the criticizing observer is now saying, look, you might have been myopic with the formulation of your policy. So the critic is now trying to say that he has power, more, better arguments. So you have the action of the government and the reaction of the critic. We know that Newton told us in physics that action and reaction are equal and opposite. It's not so in social science. So when the president comes out with something, and we are now saying it is not good enough, that shows they cannot be equal and opposite. So, in essence, in submission, look at it, for instance, why people have to criticize the president. Nigeria, as far back as 1914, has been engaging in restructuring. 1960, 3 regions. 1963, 4. Thereafter, under Gowon, 12, 19, now 36. Why is it that the president is now opposed to restructuring? Now, when people now criticize, they say it's unfair. No, he cannot unilaterally put a stop to that. That is why people criticize. Criticism can be constructive with powerful observation and hard facts.
Modely on that note, let me come quickly to you. Are President Buhari's critics, are they fair to him, or they've been, for the most part, unfair?
Let me start by saying that no government personality rises in public perception after election. Rather, there's a drop in public perception. We can only slow down the process of decline. So if President Buhari thinks that Nigerians were going to continue hailing him the way they did when he became president 6 years ago, then I'm afraid he set himself up for this disappointment because that was never going to be the case. People were always going to start asking questions after a while. And are they right to ask questions yet? Of all the three of the things on which this government rode to power, the security, the economy, and corruption. Your guess is as good as mine, Ruben, as this government delivered optimally on these three things. If they haven't, if the perception is that they haven't, people have a right to ask questions. But is the government trying? Clearly they are. There are so many extenuating circumstances why they have not achieved as much as Nigerians are hoping that they would have by now, because the first term, the first 4 years went by so quickly and not much happened. We're asked to give them another 4 years, which we have. I think that Nigerians have a right to say, you have not done as much as you promised that you were going to do for us. And government should be humble enough to take that on board and not consider everything criticism, and not consider every criticism as negative. It's just a prompt to do better.
Quite correct. Quickly, Yemi, have we been unfair to the Buhari administration in terms of our observations about the performance of the government?
And I see you're asking me that question smiling, because I'm sure you can do
No mischief intended.
What my answer would be. But I think, to be quite clear, what Modele just said, I think, frames it. You made promises, and people are simply holding you to those promises. So if you're not, when you're talking about the conditions with which you came in, you were not blind when you ran for office and understood there was an insurgency. But so let's even forget 2015, sake of argument. By the time you are running again in 2019, insurgency, northeast, northwest, north center, very clear. The economy, very clear. So you can't blame Jonathan for that anymore, President Jonathan for that anymore. The lower price of oil, you can't blame that. You cannot say you were not aware. So for the sake of argument, let's even just say that 2015, you were surprised, you didn't really fully understand, but you had 4 years. So by the time you come back in 2019, blaming what you inherited is quite frankly, let me not use the word that came to mind, but quite frankly, really unacceptable. Let me use that word. Blaming what happened 2014, 2015, when you are now president in 2021, is quite frankly unacceptable. The Bible says in a very popular scripture that without a vision, the people perish. And what President Buhari has failed to do in 2015 and even more so in 2019 is cast a vision for the Nigeria that he sees and the Nigeria he wants to build. He speaks about projects, he speaks about things, but there's no coherent vision or grand vision that Nigerians can connect to and to show that this is where I'm taking you. To get him to speak is like pulling teeth. It's always a struggle to get the president of the country to address his citizens on any major issue. But yet he'll say they're criticizing him unfairly. And I'll just use security. Modele highlighted the three things that they came in on. And I'll use security. Kidnappings and killings have continued in Nigeria unabated since he became president in 2015. Yet he has refused to change his service chiefs. Pardon me. So I don't expect, so what does he expect Nigerians to do? To twiddle their thumbs and wait for magic? You are the president of the Federal Republic of Nigeria, the commander-in-chief of the armed forces. The buck stops at your table. And when you make promises about what you would deliver to the Nigerian people, failure to deliver on those promises means Nigerians will criticize and ask questions. Simple.
Well, let's move on to Uganda. Uganda's election commission has declared incumbent President Yuweri Museveni the winner of the country's presidential election, extending his 35-year rule as his main rival alleged fraud and urged citizens to reject the results. Museveni, who is of the National Resistance Movement in Thursday's controversial election, won 58.64% of the total votes, while main opposition candidate Robert Kyagulanyi, also known as Boby Wine, won 34.83% of the votes. The election campaign period was tainted by widespread violence as security forces tried to stop supporters of leading opposition challenger Boby Wine from monitoring polling stations, and the internet access was cut off. There were about 18 million people registered as voters in this East African country of 45 million people.
Number of invalid votes, 381,386, amounting to 3.68% of the total number of votes cast. The total number of votes cast, 10,359,479, amounting to 57.22% of the total number of registered voters. Now, therefore, candidate Yuweri Museveni, having obtained the highest number of votes in the election and the votes cast in his favor being more than 50% of the valid votes cast at the election, the Electoral Commission declares Yuweri Museveni Kaguta elected President of the Republic of Uganda at the presidential election held on the 14th day of January 2021, dated this 16th day of January 2021.
First of all, I congratulate all Ugandans for the peaceful elections with a high turnout of voters. You remember there were people who were saying that the elections would not be peaceful. But we were sure they would be peaceful. We were sure because we have the capacity to maintain peace in Uganda. And anybody who deceives himself that he can disturb peace in Uganda is wasting his time. So therefore, as I promised you, after those riots which happened on the 18th of the other month, I told you that those riots will not happen again. If they happen, they will be dealt with decisively, not like the other time. So I therefore thank the people of Uganda, and I congratulate you for turning up in big numbers and voting for the candidates and for the parties of your choice. I think this may turn out to be the most...
Well, President Yuweri Museveni of Uganda there claiming victory for a sixth term. By the time he completes his, that sixth term, it will be well over 80 years. 11 presidential candidates, one woman, Mrs. Kalembe, and then the closest challenger, 38-year-old Boby Wine, who is currently under house arrest. He says the election was peaceful, but there was internet shutdown, which created issues of transparency. Observers were not really allowed. Only the African Union and the East African community sent in observers. The EU, the UN, the US did not send in observers. But, well, that's African democracy, Sittitism, again, there in Uganda. Ironically, for a man who came in to liberate Uganda.
Well, it's most unfortunate. He can claim victory, but since the word claim should be in entre guillemets, in brackets, and in apostrophe, he cannot rightly say that he won. It doesn't mean that the Electoral Commission might have declared him winner with about 58 point, you know, 0.8%.
Yes.
It doesn't matter. We do not always believe this. You have even reminded us. A day before the election, you cut off internet. No access. The opposition element, the leader, you prevented access to his place. You surrounded his house with soldiers. And at the end of the day, you unilaterally took decisions that make life difficult.
Sorry to interrupt you. We need to take a short commercial break. We'll take that break and then we'll come back. And This Day Live, the Sunday talk show will continue. We'll be right back. Stay with us. Welcome back to This Day Live, the Sunday talk show here on the Arise News channel. I still have with me Professor Bola Akinterenwa, DG Polytech Center for International Diplomacy and Strategic Studies. Yemi Adamolekun, Executive Director in Office North, Arise News Analyst Modele Sharafa Yusuf, and Professor Victor Ariole, Professor of French and Francophone Studies at the University of Lagos. Prof, you were commenting on the result of the Ugandan elections.
You see, look at the president, an African president, a Ugandan president, coming into the open, telling the whole world lies is unbefitting, most unexpected. He's telling the whole world that the elections were peaceful, when already people have records and could see that there was violence. And he's even telling the whole world that since the political history of the country, since 1962, that this was an election that was
without cheating.
Without cheating. No. Why would a human being, Museveni, for instance, be telling white lies? It's unbefitting. So in this case, the youth, the Ugandan youth, do not appear to me to have any bright future in that country with a 76-year-old person not allowing the youth to learn from the rags that he had put on.
Well,
most unfortunate.
Boby Wine of the National Unity Platform Party is alleging voter fraud. We don't know whether he will go the additional step of challenging the outcome of the elections in court. But what has happened is that many of the cabinet members of President Museveni, including his vice president, they lost their parliamentary seats. Professor Ariole.
Now, can't you see, losing parliamentary seat means that Ugandans are trying. You know, I really commend Boby Wine for getting him up to 34% of about 18 million people who were supposed to vote. And it's a gradual process, I see, because it's like George Weah in Liberia. He lost the first time, but he won the second time. So gradually, the next time you win. You know, I also commend Museveni, because this is about 15, not fewer than 15 people have decided to be in position in Uganda since 1962. Some even spent only 10 days being president or being prime minister. So he has really tried. He's a warlord, and we know that everything about him has to be by force.
I don't know whether
there is no doubt about that.
To commend.
Well, whatever it is, you see.
Turning himself into a president for life.
The eastern region.
You can commend him for rigging.
The eastern part of Africa, we know, happened to be a place where Scythism reigned. Is it Rwanda? Is it Burundi? Is it Ethiopia that is in war now? Is it... no, it's not. I'm talking of East Africa.
Central, okay.
You know, it's only Kenya and Tanzania that you can think of a semblance of reality going on there. So Uganda is really... Since 1962, have never been at peace. Museveni has been the one that keep on doing his war tactics and war strategy to keep the system going.
Well, Museveni says it's a symbol of stability.
Well,
and the first African head of state to congratulate him is John Magufuli of Tanzania. And his compatriots are attacking him for supporting dictatorship in Uganda. Modele, let me come to you very quickly.
The question being...
Hello?
Uganda.
Hello?
Yes, I said let me come to you quickly. The outcome of the presidential election in Uganda with President Museveni getting a 6th term in office.
It's a shame what has happened in Uganda, really, because everything pointed towards the fact that this was going to be the outcome, that Museveni was going to hold on to power. He started by, like 5 years ago, by changing the rules about age. He started by changing the number of terms that a president is allowed to serve. So he always worked towards the fact that he was going to remain in office until he died. And if at 76 years old, he's taking another 5 years, he's won in quotes another 5 years term, then the possibility of that happening is very high. As you pointed out, Ruben, these were never transparent elections. The EU refused ab initio to send observers for these elections because they said previous recommendations were not taken on board or implemented. The United States, only a day to the elections on January 13, cancelled their own observation team as well, said they should not go because everything pointed to the fact that these were not going to be free, fair elections and there was not going to be any accountability. The whole dictator's playbook was thrown at this. Opposition leaders were hounded and put under house arrest. Before that, the government, the military had been hounding opposition leaders. People were killed. About 100 of Boby Wine's supporters were killed during the electioneering campaign. So there was no way this was going to be a fair election. So whatever result was declared by Museveni, people are just going to take it in their stride. Well, maybe not in their strides, because people are still saying that they're going to appeal and that they're going to fight this. Boby Wine is said to have won in the urban areas, and Museveni was said to have won in the villages. You do the maths. Where is it likely to have, who's likely to have the most votes, given the way urban centers and rural centers, rural areas are populated? But the point that Professor Role made is very valid. Scythism is a big problem in East Africa. It felt like forever, if you remember, getting Daniel Arap Moi out in Kenya. But it eventually happened. So if Museveni doesn't end up dying in office, Uganda might be able to take him out. But another thing is that at 76 years old, why is it that African leaders still think that they need to be in office, that the only answers to the problems of African countries?
Well,
at 76 years old, the Yorubas say it is today's dog that knows how to hunt today's rabbit. Why don't you give young people the opportunity to do this?
Well, there are some people who argue that it's not a question of age. After all, Next Wednesday, the United States is going to have as 46th president a gentleman called Joseph Biden, who is 78 years old. Yemi, quickly, let me come to you. The presidential election in Uganda.
Thank you. That's actually what I wanted to lead off with. Joe Biden, 78. Museveni, so really not about his age, but I think it's the fair, but knowing that it's not his age, knowing that if there were free and fair elections, that he wouldn't win. I think I was going to commend Boby Wine on getting 30+% of the votes, but then again, thinking about it, if Museveni's numbers are contestable, not quite sure his are accurate either. But for anything else, it is worthy to commend him for just staying the course, for insisting that he's going to fight this fight at great sacrifice to himself, to his wife. There was a footage of a video of his wife being dragged the morning of the elections. But he's decided that this is a fight he wants to fight. Would he ultimately be Uganda's president? Maybe, maybe not. But he's definitely opened the door and given a voice. And the parliamentary elections also show what is possible. So it'll be interesting to see how this plays out. Prof talks about Museveni lying being unbefitting. It is very befitting. He's been lying forever. So I don't know why you're expecting him not to lie about
consistent now.
And also to Prof Ariole, commending him for pragmatism or being able to hold on to power. I'm not quite sure what's to be commended there. But it is worthy of note that he's the third longest serving African leader after Obiang of Equatorial Guinea and Obiya in Cameroon. So, yeah.
Well, just before we go, our final topic, which again we may return to next Sunday. Donald Trump takes his place in history as the first president to be impeached twice in the history of the United States of America's presidency. It comes after 10 of his fellow Republicans joined Democrats in the House of Representatives to charge him with inciting an insurrection in the violent rampage and assault on the Capitol. The vote in the Democratic-controlled House was 232 to 197, although it appears unlikely the swift impeachment will lead to Trump's ouster before his 4-year term ends. And Democratic President-elect Joe Biden is inaugurated on January the 20th. Well, Prof, very quickly, just a brief commentary on this before we wrap it up today. We know, of course, that next week there will be the 46th President of the United States.
The beauty of the second impeachment is just to register the point that in a well-civilized country where institutions are strong, you can be Mr. President, but you are not above the law. And now, with the second impeachment, he has the likelihood of not being able to qualify to be in any public office, with trial or without trial. That is very good. Nigeria should learn lessons on how to deal with people who refuse to comply with the rule of law.
Well, thank you, Prof. We'll not be able to take any more comments, but we'll be back to that same topic of American democracy and presidentialism next Sunday. You've been watching This Day Live, the Sunday talk show here on Arise News. I'm Ruben Abati. From our entire team here in Lagos, it's bye for now, and thank you very much for watching. We'll see you again next Sunday.